We do ask that all participants are muted on entry. We will use the raise your hand function. Please as well remove your video. Sorry. If you are on your phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute. When it's time for answering questions, we will unmute you and we will call on you one at a time. Thank you, and I will introduce you to Superintendent Kelly Clunchy.
Thank you, Dorothy. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our K-5 Special Education Forum this evening. I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have 3 panelists this evening, and 4, I guess, including myself. First of all, I'd like to introduce our new PPS Director, Mrs. Lynn Snow. We also have our Shaker Lane Principal with us, Mrs. Michelle Kane, and our Russell Street Principal, Mrs. Cheryl Temple. We organized this evening to be able to focus on questions that you may have regarding special education. We heard from a number of our parents that they would appreciate an opportunity to talk about special education. So we have arranged, as I've said, this forum for that purpose. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the questions over to our PPS Director, Mrs. Lynn Snow.
Thank you, Dr. Clunchy. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, everyone who has joined us. I would also like to thank Michelle and Cheryl for joining us for another forum. I also appreciate that everybody submitted questions in advance, so I just wanted to go over a couple things first before we dive in. The first thing that I wanted to just make sure that I mentioned was that we are going to be reforming, or we're going to be creating an interim leadership team for CPAC. So there will be some information coming out to parents soon for that meeting. So stay tuned and keep your eyes out for a meeting time and date, and that will be forthcoming. In addition to that, I did want to, a lot of questions have come related to the definition of a high needs student. So I did want to just kind of start by going through the definition of high needs students. And for the purpose of this conversation, I think we'll be able to kind of refer back to that a little bit. So students with complex and significant needs include students already identified as high needs through the IEP process on their IEP form, and that is a disability level of need form. And so students must meet 2 criteria: so that their services are provided outside of the general education classroom, that the service providers are special education teachers and related service providers, and that the special education services constitute more than 75% of the student's school days. In addition, a high needs student could be a student who cannot engage in remote learning due to their disability related needs, students who primarily use aided and augmentative communication, students who are homeless, students who are in foster care or congregate care, and or students who are dually identified as English learners. So what I would like to do tonight is to go through all of the questions that have been submitted. There were a number of questions that were not pertaining to special education. So what I would like to do first is go through all of the questions that we have that are related to special education, and then be able to open it up to the group. So if there are people that were not able to submit a question, or if there is a question that I address and I provide a response and it makes you think of another question that you might have or a follow-up, please just hold that until I get through all of the questions. And then if we have additional time at the end of that, I'm not sure that we will, we'll be able to address some of the questions that were submitted that weren't necessarily related to special education. That being said, I do want to just refer everyone back to a lot of the questions that came in that were not special ed relevant are able to get, you're able to get responses to those questions on the FAQ document, which is linked on the Littleton Public Schools website. In addition to that, I would also suggest that you might watch the parent forums that the principals have done. The links to those are also on the LPS website as well. So we will get underway. So the first question that came up, I'm just going to read the question, and then provide the response. For kids who struggle sitting still, particularly any whose IEP and or classroom strategies require movement breaks, how will these be accommodated in both remote and hybrid settings? In remote specifically, what if the student needs to walk around the room so their face will not always be on camera? For hybrid, how can they move without leaving the room/instruction? Finally, our primary concern is that our child will spend a fair amount of time, quote unquote, in trouble for noncompliance. So first of all, I do want to reassure all parents that students will still be able to be provided these necessary accommodations. We may need to be creative and look at alternatives and find different strategies if needed. So if a student is fidgety or needs that movement in space to feel more centered, we can look at utilizing move and sit cushions, alternative seating, a standing desk. We can look at those types of alternatives which would limit movement in the space and potential contact. That being said, we can also accommodate that student who might need to move about the room and take walks. They might just need to be a little bit more kind of planful and thought out and less kind of free flowing. But we can definitely look at that as a team, and the recommendations would be driven by the team. I will also say if a student is engaging in remote learning and they need to kind of move about the room, and that's a accommodation that student needs, it makes them feel more comfortable or able to focus and attend better, the student will be able to, with collaboration between the teacher and the parents, if they need to shut off their video so that they're not kind of walking back and forth through the video, they can certainly do that. And we can put in place those accommodations as well. And I think really just the key is the communication and collaboration between the school and the families. So the next question that came in, my son is doing remote classes just because he can't wear a mask for long periods. Is there any way he can still get one-on-one speech and OT a couple times a week in school? So if you have chosen remote, we can certainly consider providing IEP services in person. I think that the primary contact where you would start would be to reach out for pre-K-5 parents, reach out to Allie Gilman, the team chair, and we can discuss how we would be able to provide that. And she'd be able to work with you and the team to see if that's something that can be worked out schedule-wise. I will also say that if a student's not able to wear a mask due to their disability, we will be able to work directly with the student to build their tolerance and to look at alternatives, to look at different types of masks, and just building their tolerance and looking at where they are and starting at the point where they're at and going from there. So the next question that came in, I have a new to Russell Street School third grader that has received 2 times 30 individual speech instruction at Shaker Lane. It was switched to 1 times 30 minutes a week shared in the spring. I never received notification of this change. Although the time was changed to less, I enjoyed being able to see and hear what she worked on. It was advised that she continues speech. I'm wondering what that will look like for her through the hybrid and remote learning in the fall. And so a couple things. If a student's IEP has 2 times 30, there may have been extenuating circumstances or something that went on that the face-to-face in-person remote instruction that was provided 1 time a week, there may have been a reason for that. I can't necessarily speak to that, but what I can say is that services are going to look different going forward and in the fall. So going forward, I think we've had the opportunity to learn a lot about how we can deliver services in a remote format when we need to, but we are also obligated to provide the services as indicated on the IEP. So that's the first part of the question. And so the other part, which I think is a great question, is that you enjoy being able to see and hear what she worked on. And so I do think that if that's something that we can do when the schedules permit to maintain that service being delivered in a remote format, so you can stay engaged with the service. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for generalization and carryover. So I think if the schedules align and we're able to do that, that's something that we would be happy to consider. Okay, the next question. So this is a question that's not necessarily specific to special ed, but I am going to address it because I think it's an important question. Is my child expected to be online for 6 hours a day? The sample schedule seems very extensive and non-conducive to working parents who will be remotely teaching their children as well. So there will be fluidity with regard to the schedules when the students are remote learning. It is synchronous learning, so the students will be expected to be logged in and engaged and be following the direction of the teacher during those times. That being said, there will be times and breaks built in for the students to be away from the screen. So they may be doing a mini lesson, and then they may be shifting to doing some seat work. And so the student will not be kind of locked into the screen for the duration of the 6 hours for sure. And the schedule will also align with, lunches and breaks and those types of things. And those things will be also built in for the students who are remote learning at home as well. Okay. The next question. I find it hard to understand that Littleton is making preschool and transitional grade a high priority for more in-person learning. Shouldn't kindergarten be considered a high priority as well? My daughter is on an IEP and will fall behind if she is pulled out in the new revised half-day program. Are they going to have different in-person options for special education kids? And so the first part that I will address is that the DESE has provided the guidance regarding prioritizing high needs students for in-person instruction. I did talk about that definition. Within these priorities is also the need to determine students' need related to the disruption of service delivery and instruction. So we are able to look at cases on an individual basis, and we definitely will be doing that for sure. And so we do also understand that, students did experience a disruption of their service delivery for a period of time. And so I will be addressing that in a few questions away to be talking about specifics around that. One question that I will also address, it came up a lot, even though it's not a special ed specific question. My question is that will a sibling who has a different last name be able to be accommodated so that they can attend school on the same days? Yes, if they are siblings with a different last name, they are still able to have their schedules aligned and be able to attend the in-person on the same days, for sure. Okay, and so the next question is, has the school district considered how difficult it is going to be to have to teach our child remote 3 days of the week for pretty much all day and still attempt to work and provide for our family and have our child learn and move on to the next grade? And again, while this isn't a special ed specific question, I do want to, acknowledge and say that there's no question that this is presenting many challenges across the board to everyone. I can say truly as well that the district has considered this, and they're going to be doing all they can to have reasonable expectations for family. But please continue to provide input and share feedback so that we can continue to make improvements as we go along. And that the teachers are going to continue to be working to set the students up for success throughout the time we're working in this blended model. And it's, definitely our hope that this is going to be a short-term situation, and that everybody's goal is that we're able to get students back in school full-time when we're able to, meet all of those safety requirements. So yes, it definitely is. It definitely is a challenge, but I think it's definitely a challenge that Littleton Public Schools is up to at this point. And we are here to support families. So if there is support that you need and you're struggling with your part of the remote learning, please reach out. The next question is, what is going to happen with children with IEPs who need OT, PT, speech, etc.? How are you going to accommodate their needs? So some of these services are going to be able to be delivered in person, and some are going to be able to be delivered remote, especially when students are participating in a blended model. So they're participating in a mix of services in person and remote. So service delivery will be different going forward than it did look in the spring. You will be receiving an individualized learning plan document that outlines how the services are going to be provided, and students are going to receive all of their IEP services. So if there are services that it makes sense to be provided during the remote learning portion, that will be reflected in the student's individualized learning plan. If they're able to be provided in person or remote, that will also be that is also able to be discussed collaboratively with families and the school staff as well. So I can say, you know, there really is no hard and fast rule. Just to give an example, there could be a student that has 2 times 30 speech 5 days a week. And so the team collectively might say, okay, we really want to deliver one of those speech sessions while the student is in person, and then we want to deliver the other one while the student is remote, so that they can engage with the student and the parent can be present too for generalization and carryover. But there, in another circumstance, because it's individualized, a student that has 2 times 30 speech sessions during the week, both of those might be more feasible to deliver them in person, or there might be barriers or limitations and they would be able to be delivered remote. I think the important thing is that we want to make sure that the services are provided and they're provided appropriately, and the student is able to access the services they need to be able to meet their IEP goals. Okay. So this one is a little bit similar, but I'll go through this one. The next question is, how will children on an IEP that require remedial services receive those services remotely? Will a child's service on their IEP be reduced because of reduced time at school? For example, 4 times 30 per week, but they're only in school 2 days a week. Will there be any additional consideration for children on an IEP who have regressed? Students will be receiving a full educational program. So even though they're only in person 2 days a week, they are receiving instruction 5 days a week. So services will not be reduced because of the reduced time at school. We may need to do a blended model of services with the IEP service delivery as well, but we will be prioritizing our ability to deliver those services in person when we can. And yes, there is also consideration for students who have regressed. And so there is guidance from the Department of Ed regarding the provision for recovery support, COVID compensatory services, and additional services as well. I'm going to go through the description of that at the end once I get through all of the submitted questions, because I feel like that might be something that we will want to discuss a little bit interactively. Okay. So the next question is, how are you going to support students who struggle with executive functioning skills with accessing remote learning, especially students that have working parents and are not always going to be present to assist? Second part of the question is, for students that receive in-class support B-Grid services, what is that going to look like during the remote days? So that can take a variety of forms. If the student receives B-Grid support, that may be the special education staff pushing into the Google Meet when they're remote, and then spending time meeting with the student individually or in a small group to provide that executive functioning or that academic support, just as they would in person. And so the next question is not special ed specific, but another one that I do want to just mention. So I would like to register for remote learning for now, but can I change to a hybrid model in between the first trimester? I'll ask the principals to also weigh in, but I do know that we're asking parents to make a commitment and make a decision for the first trimester. That being said, if it is a student with a disability who is experiencing significant unanticipated challenges, I would ask that you contact us directly so that we can have a conversation about that and look if we need to make an adjustment, because we do have the ability to look at that as well under extenuating circumstances. I don't know if...
I just wanted to chime in a little bit about that, because I've had a couple of questions come my way. I just want to be transparent with parents that we're going to work work to our best of ability to support the plan that you're currently in. And it wouldn't just be like a switch. Okay, we're having a difficult time, we're going to switch models and come into the school. I want parents to know that we'll have our guidance staff involved, we'll have our BCBA involved, I'll be involved, our assistant principal, Ms. Deacon, will be involved. So we want to work with the family to keep the model intact. And if we've exhausted all those avenues, then we will entertain the thought of coming back in. So just want parents to know there are resources outside of just shifting from plan to plan.
Perfect. Okay.
And I would agree with Michelle for Russell Street as well.
Okay, the next question. What is testing going to look like and how do you plan to adhere to timelines? So this is a multi-part question and it's a very good one. So the first part is, what is testing going to look like and how do you plan to adhere to timelines? The second part, will you be providing compensatory services from the spring? The third part is, how will service providers be approaching data collection specifically for students in the remote program? In parentheses, difficult to assess if they're being given any help from caregivers. 4, will all IEP meetings be remote? 5, what is the plan for conducting meetings that are out of compliance? Okay, so this is a very good question and it hits on a lot of points that we need to address. So I'm going to kind of take it part by part. For the first part, what is testing going to look like and how do you plan to adhere to timelines? So there is a backlog. There is a backlog that we need to work through, and the staff have compiled all of the outstanding meetings and evals and testing that we need to accomplish, and we are going to be working through that backlog as efficiently and as quickly as we can. We might need to make some adjustments to how we look at determining eligibility. We might need to kind of adjust our assessment and evaluation practices in order to meet the referral question and have it fit with the model that the student is in. But going forward, we are, DESE is not giving any latitude on timelines. We are expected to do everything that we can to adhere to timelines. That being said, there is the reality of there was a backlog. There are many meetings that still need to be chaired. So we're going to be reasonable in our approach to work through that backlog. The second question, how will you be providing compensatory services from the spring? So we are going to be looking at the students' performance as they go forward into the fall, and we will be collecting data and we will be assessing students' performance, and we will be looking at how they are doing. And then we will be determining as teams what types of support they need in order to recoup. So whether it is recovery support, which might be kind of a general ed type tier 2 support that they need, or they might need something more specific, and we might need to further define that through compensatory services. What did the student not receive, and what do we need to do in order to make the student whole, is the threshold and the standard that we need to look at. The next part, how will service providers be approaching data collection specifically for students in the remote program, and in parentheses, difficult to assess if they're being given any help from caregivers? Well, the help from caregivers is essential. So we will be looking to parents to share their input, their anecdotal data, and share their experiences, because that is going to be considered when we look at a student's performance, because the learning environment is the home environment. We also will be collecting data and we will be able to assess students' performance. And I think that one of the positives is that there's been a tremendous amount from March until now of professional development and work that teachers have done in order to look at creative ways that they can assess student performance using a blended model of service delivery. The next part, will all IEP meetings be remote? So for the most part, yes. We want to hold IEP meetings remote as much as we can. That being said, if a parent would like to have that meeting in person, we will be able to arrange for that. It just might mean that some of the participants may be joining the meeting remote, but we will definitely be wanting to provide the majority of our IEP meetings in a remote format going forward, for sure, for the time being. And what is the plan for conducting meetings that are out of compliance? The plan is to start catching up and holding those meetings as soon as school starts, and just working through all of the outstanding meetings that we need to hold. Okay, the next question. Hi, will all children on IEPs, especially children who spend half of their day outside of the classroom receiving one-to-one services, be scheduled for full-time in-person learning 4 days a week? And yes, so as I talked about in the beginning, students who are receiving a significant amount of their services outside of the general ed classroom will be considered in that high needs category and prioritized for 4 days of in-person instruction. Okay, and so the next question is, how will all IEP accommodations be handled for any remote portion of school? So again, accommodations will still be provided to students when they are remote. The individual learning plans will articulate how the accommodations and modifications will be implemented. If they need to be adapted based on the environment, that will be shared through the individualized learning plan as well. Okay. The next question, will students who are on IEPs be able to attend all 4 days of the hybrid school model, as they are the ones most in need of in-person learning? So again, I'll just reiterate, the high needs definition is the standard we need to look at, and as if we are able to expand our capacity and to engage more learners under that, for sure. I just think at this point we're still kind of figuring out the numbers that we have and the cohorts, and we need to look at that and determine if we can expand our category of students that we can prioritize for in-person. Okay. This isn't special education specific, but I do want to mention it too. If my child has the sniffles due to allergies or a common cold with no fever, will they be turned around at the door and not allowed in school for that day? So the answer is no. There are protocols that are in place, and there's a symptom checklist, and there's criteria that the students need to be exhibiting in order for them to meet the criteria to not be able to attend school. And I don't know if Michelle and Cheryl, if you want to piggyback on that, but that's pretty much the short answer. Okay. Will one-on-one sessions and small group lessons be grouped by learning style in remote and hybrid? And so my response to that is that there will need to be some adjustments made with regard to groupings, depending on limitations that may exist. So, for example, a prime grouping that we want to develop might not be an option due to the students' cohort schedules not aligning. But that being said, we will be able to kind of readjust some things when we're back to full in-person groupings if needed. And then I will also say too that I think that the staff and at the buildings, they have a lot of very creative ideas of ways to be able to preserve some of those groupings and to ensure that the students that need to work together have the ability to do so, whether they're in person or in a remote setting. Okay, this next question, also not special ed specific, but I think worth noting. For remote learning, can you release a list of required software? We will be unable to tell if we have a usable device until we know what it will be used for. Will there be any IT support for parents before the Chromebooks come in? So the district is recommending a Chromebook or a laptop with Chrome installed, with a working camera and a microphone for use on Google Meet. All the programs that the district uses are online, they're web-based, so besides the preferred browser, there will not be the need to install any other applications. There is additional information related to technology support and resources on the LPS website, so I would definitely direct you to check that out as well. There is a There is a question that came up frequently about school supply lists, so I do want to mention that they will be coming, but the buildings are working on creating those lists because they really want the lists to. I'll let Michelle and Cheryl weigh in on that.
I think Cheryl and I are both, we know our teachers are updating them, so I would go right to the website. Cheryl, I don't think all of my teachers have updated yet. I think they're working on it, so I would at least give them until probably the end of next week. But I know they are trying to update those right on the website that are there.
The Russell Street supply list will be in this Friday's weekend update. So for any parents who want to check, they all have been updated in the last couple of days. They'll be on the website as soon as possible, but they absolutely, for grades 3, 4, and 5, will be in this Friday's weekend update, so parents can check there.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The next question, if the system goes fully remote at any point in time, what is the criteria for students to receive in-person services? My child is a hybrid student in school Thursday and Friday. Will she receive services in person Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? So this is a two-part question. First, if you have specific questions for me or for the school, whether or not your student falls into that category of high need and is able to be considered for the 4 days a week in person, please reach out to us directly if you haven't gotten communicated with as of yet. And if your child attends hybrid and is not attending 4 days a week in person, they may receive their services while they're in person or while they're remote, depending on the services at how they are articulated in the grid. So I'll refer back to my example of the student who receives 2 30-minute sessions a week of speech. So they might need to be adaptations for the services if feasible, and we may make adjustments if needed, but that will all be reflected on the individual learning plan. So if we wanted to be able to provide the service in a longer format, so instead of 2 sessions of 30 minutes, if we wanted to provide the service 1 time a week in a 60-minute block, that change would be reflected on the individual learning plan. And so even if the rest of the school has entered into a hybrid or remote model of instruction, schools and districts must make every effort to maintain in-person instruction for students with disabilities, particularly those who have complex and significant needs, as well as preschool-aged students. For example, if a school or district needs to implement a hybrid model of instruction for students, teachers may be able to simultaneously maintain full-time in-person instruction for students in self-contained special education classes. So the districts are going to prioritize maintaining that in-person as much as is feasible. And so that's currently what we're working on doing, and we're wanting to provide 4 days a week of in-person to as many students as we can who meet that high needs criteria. Okay. Will you be advocating for out-of-district schools to be delivering full in-person education? Yes, I will. I have been, and I will continue to. And so I will say that Littleton Public Schools has made incredible efforts with wanting to create opportunities where we can provide 4 days a week of in-person instruction for our high needs students. So I feel like if we're able to meet that threshold and standard, then we should be really, I feel responsible for encouraging the out-of-district schools to also be considering that as well. If you have a specific question regarding your student, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. Okay. And so the next question, if schools are required to return to fully remote if schools are required to return to fully remote at some point during the 2021 school year, how will IEP services be delivered to students that are visually, physically, and cognitively impaired? Will services be outsourced or delivered at the child's home? So if schools are required to be fully remote, our intention would be, again, to preserve maintaining as many in-person services as is feasible. Some of these services may be able to be successfully delivered in a remote format, and some were not able to be in the spring, but may be able to going forward. and some we will need to address on an individual case-by-case basis. So I'll give the example. If a student has orientation and mobility services, if the purpose of the service was for the student to be able to successfully orient to the setting, and the setting where the educational service has become is home, we're still obligated to provide that service and determine if we're able to do so by offering that service remotely. If not, we will look at alternatives to being able to do that in a different format. And so the next question is, how will compensatory services be determined and when? And so this, now I'll share with you the specific language in the Department of Ed guidance. So it has been very clear that moving into the 2021 school year, where instruction may be in-person, remote, or a combination of both, a hybrid model, it's critical that we identify and address the impact of the interruptions caused by the unexpected suspension of in-person education due to the COVID-19 pandemic on students with IEPs. The Department of Ed recommends that districts focus on authentic engagement of students with disabilities and their families in determining students' needs for services and support to mitigate the impact of extended school closures on their learning. So we will be working with families as we move forward to determine what we need to do and what we need to plan for students who are in need of compensatory services. So this question, again, is kind of another iteration of a previous question, but if at any point during the 2021 school year, the general student population is required to learn remotely, will vulnerable and disabled students who need one-to-one services be prioritized for in-person learning? And so, yes, schools and districts must make their best efforts to take all of the necessary steps to ensure that students with disabilities, particularly, again, preschool age students and those with complex or significant needs, receive as many services as possible in person, whether full-time or part-time. This is a question that isn't special ed specific, but did come up a couple times, so I do want to address it as well. There's questions about how mask breaks will work. And if Michelle wants to jump in on that, I think that'd be helpful.
So I'll start with that. So our ideal mask breaks, we have some canopies that are being purchased. So the mask breaks, the plan is to have them taken outside to the extent possible. If we have to have them take place in the classroom, we'll have to make sure, just like at lunchtime, all students have 6 feet of distance, which they do. But the intent is to have them take the mask breaks outside, weather permitting. If we have to use the cafeteria, the gym, other larger locations, spaces in the hallway that are designated with spots, we'll do that as well. But the intention is to start outside.
Thank you.
At Russell Street, we have mask breaks built into all of our grade level 3, 4, and 5 schedules. One, for example, is in the morning when students have snacks, so they would be ordinarily taking their mask off to take that break anyways. And then there's a mask break, a natural mask break at lunchtime when students are eating, and then we have one built in the afternoon when students will take their mask off and work quietly at their desks. We, in the past, have had a break area on the outside of the front doors at Russell Street, and we're going to create that a break area outside with some seating under the roof. So if students just have had it and they need to go outside and take their mask off and have a break, we're going to have an area there where students can go outside and sit and have a break. Maybe that's not scheduled. So we certainly have accommodated for that in our scheduling as well.
Great. Okay, the next question, again, not special ed specific, but I think important to address. How is Littleton Public Schools going to ensure student privacy while logged into classes remotely? And how will Littleton Public Schools ensure student and class images are not shared by school staff, students, or parents on social media? I will also let the principals weigh in on that too, but the district does have expectations for students and families for appropriate use of technology, and those same standards and expectations are in place when using virtual technology as well. Getting there. So, this is also a non-special ed specific question, but one that I think Michelle or Cheryl, one of you guys already answered, but I didn't copy and paste your response into my sheet yet. It was about the buses and bus pickups. I can't remember which one of you.
Yeah, so just remind me of the question because I think I wrote back to you on that, Beth.
Yes, it was a question. It was a question about, will there still be an option for bus pickup and drop off? And you had said that I think there's a bus survey or something.
So Steve Mark, our business manager, will be sending out a bus registration information. He's hoping to send that out in the next few days. So you can apply for your bus registration. So really, it's just going to be a matter of, are you utilizing the bus or not utilizing the bus? Once we have that information, we'll tailor additional drop-off locations if we need it. I hope that answers the question. I think that's what it was.
Okay. The next question is, will there be any support for out-of-district children doing hybrid programs during the remote hours of both parents working out of the home? That would be a question for you to bring back to the out-of-district placement. And if you have, if you would like, support to engage in that conversation, please reach out to me directly. Will my child have in-person OT? Will my child get any assistance from the classroom aide while in the classroom and when at home on the 3 remote days if my child is needing a small group aid? So yes, if your student has in-class support in their grid, that support will continue to be provided in both in-person and while they are remote. Okay. Will Google Classroom, and this is the last question before we can open it, before we open it up for questions. Will Google Classroom continue to be used, and will my child receive help managing their inbox and staying on top of reading teacher comments and seeing what assignments they have, what assignments have been returned, along with executive functioning help that is needed with the IEP? And I love that that's the last question, because I think I, at this point, would like a little bit of support with that as well. But what I can say is that if the student has that service or accommodations and modifications reflected on their IEP, that will continue to be provided in the fall. Okay. Dorothy, does anybody have any questions or their hand up?
I do not see any at this time, but, oh, wait a minute. Who did I miss? I don't, let's see.
I saw Eileen Wiedengartner.
Okay. Okay, yes. Okay, Eileen Wiedengartner, question, please. You're muted, Eileen. There you go.
Hi, Eileen.
Myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Thank you for all the planning you've done here. I do have a question around what happens if we have, clearly everyone in this meeting has students on IEPs or 504s, and I'm curious, so with 6 months of loss, will there be opportunities for us to get additives into their IEPs? Like, I think my daughter has slipped so much that things we had taken her out of may need to be revisited come this year. And then on top of that, when it comes to like preferential seating and redirection, how is that going to work if you have a child that's full-time remote?
Okay, so the first part, if the student has experienced regression, then we would be looking at that regression and the impact and what that had. And there is a continuum of supports that we're able to extend to families. And that can range from what I refer to as recovery support. So that would be more kind of tier 2 interventions that wouldn't necessarily be reflected in an IEP, but would be provided to bolster or to provide some additional support support to the student, whether through additional accommodations through the district accommodation plan or through some intervention blocks that are just available to every student, because even students without disabilities may have experienced some setbacks from the interruption of the in-person learning over this span of time. And so the next kind of tier of that would be COVID compensatory services. And so that would be determined through the team process, and the team would work together to determine what the need was and a plan for delivering and providing those compensatory services. Compensatory services are not services that are reflected in an IEP. We develop a plan to provide those compensatory services, and it's a short term in order to make the student whole again. The next tier would be considered additional services. So if even with those two other tiers, there's still substantial loss, then the teams would come together, and they may be providing an additional evaluation or coming back together as a group to look at if there is additional services that need to be delivered or provided for the duration of the IEP period. And those services would be discussed as a team and proposed if needed.
Okay.
The second part of the question about preferential seating, that's a unique one. So if they are if they're fully remote and they have an accommodation of preferential seating, if they're sitting right in front of their laptop, they've got the best seat in the house. So some of the accommodations and modifications that students have in their IEPs may not translate to a remote learning model. So if they do, they will be provided. But for example, if it's like preferential seating and there's no other students that they need to be preferred, above, then that accommodation wouldn't necessarily be provided when they are in the remote learning context.
Okay, so would there be abilities to tweak that that accommodation so to meet the needs of a child who may have preferential seating because of attention issues?
Oh, for sure. Yep. That's a great question. Yep. So, like I said, if you have that student who is, fidgety and needs those movement breaks, or if they have an accommodation because it's an attending or focus. So, yes, absolutely, there can be a conversation about do those accommodations need to be adapted for a remote learning, or are those interferences or variables removed because of the format of remote learning? So, I will also say, there were so many students that did struggle with this format, but then there are a lot of students who also were able to thrive and were able to, make really nice gains in this context as well. But can those accommodations be looked at and adapted if needed? Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question, then I'm going to shut up for the night. So if we're looking at students and we're going to assess where they're at, and we're going to check out map testing or do whatever assessment system there is to say, this is where our students are right now. If they're fully remote, will they have to come in for the days that you're doing map testing or something like that? I know it's special ed, but it's not special ed, but it's special ed for me. So,
yeah, so I think it's applicable to a lot of students, and it does call up the discussion about assessment and evaluation. So for students who are up for reeval or for an initial evaluation for eligibility, there are ways that we can test in person, and there are ways that we can also test remotely as well. So there's a lot of online testing and assessment platforms that we can use. So when I spoke earlier and said we may need to kind of relook at just the concept of evaluation and assessment, that's what I meant by that. So we might need to look at what is the referral question first, and really then say, okay, this is the referral question. Given the current constraints and limitations, how are we going to obtain the information that we need in order to answer that referral question?
I'm not sure I'm talking about referrals, though.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I'm not talking about IEP referrals. I'm
Okay.
talking about student progress on the standards that you'd see through the MAP testing that districts do to see where their weaknesses are, if we're going to develop the response to intervention,
Mhm.
like how to, I know like the MAP testing that the kids did in school, my son, who's 5th grade last year, but going into 6th, would sit in a room all day until that MAP testing was done.
But was that done on a computer?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I can help out here. Kelly Clenchy. Map testing is done on a computer. Excuse me. It's an adaptive test, which simply means that it allows us to determine the proficiency of a student. If they are functioning at grade 5.8 and they've just begun the grade 5 year, we have a better understanding of their skill development or concept development. We would have to check with the tech team. I'm just off the top of my head. I'm not sure how tied in we are, whether we're fully server based or we're in the cloud. I believe we transformed into the cloud a couple of years ago, but I'd have to double check on that. If that's the case, then they should be able to take that test at home.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Susan Henry, your question, please.
Yeah, hi, thank you. This is great. Really appreciate you guys doing this. So my question was, you said that you would be sending out schedules that would talk about how these services were going to be delivered, and I was just wondering when we should expect those schedules. And then my second question was just like my family recently moved to Littleton, so how is that going to affect, they transferred in within the IEP, my sons, but just wondering how that's going to look because it might be different in this system.
Absolutely. Okay. So the first part of your question, you were asking specifically about. Can you repeat that for me? The first part.
Just when we should expect those schedules.
Yes.
How the services will be outlined.
Yep. So the building will have schedules, but in addition to that, the students on IEPs are going to be receiving individualized learning plans. So back in the spring, parents were provided what were called individualized remote learning plans, but now DESE has changed the name because not all of the students are remote. They're individual learning plans. So the learning plans are going to provide that information, and they're going to provide you the information as far as how those services are going to be delivered and how the services are going to be met. Those will be coming out in the next week. Staff are back, and so once the liaisons are back, they will start working on those plans, and once they are finalized, they are going to be sent out to parents. So they really are kind of like a snapshot to the IEP or an explanation of how we are going to take the IEP and implement the services given this adjusted model, because the schedules may be a little bit different, things might need to be adapted, and so this is our way to inform you of those changes so that you're aware of how the services are going to be delivered and if there's changes to the delivery of those services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Belinda Rosenblum, your question? There you go.
Okay. Hi. Okay, thanks. A few varied questions. One on the computer thing. So I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner, or will have them, I guess, heading into that grade. So I saw the delay in the computers, and Michelle, we filled out the form for you to get that in. If he's on an IEP, does he get priority to get one of those Chromebooks? We just literally don't have a computer to have him get going, and so we're just already starting to think about that.
Any student that doesn't have access to a device will be provided a device for sure.
For September or for October? I just know there was a delay. That's why I was asking.
Oh,
Right.
September.
Right, but there was a survey that went out, Belinda, if you saw that for 2nd grade. So if you filled that out, then your child will receive a device. That the district is working, our tech department, to secure devices. Hopefully we'll have as many for the need that is out there right now.
Right, okay. It's all a supply demand thing, exactly, yeah.
supplying, but then your question about will a student with a disability be prioritized? So if they do have an accommodation of access to technology, yes, they would be.
I mean, he has a developmental delay, so we would need it just to participate in the classes, I guess. But I'll just keep my fingers crossed that the supply will match the demand and we'll be fine there. Yes, we're all doing a prayer. Then on the school supplies, and excuse me for not knowing this, but is it one for the whole grade, or do we need to know the teacher to be able to know the school supplies list?
The Shaker Lane's doing grade level supplies.
Oh, okay, got it. Historically,
So I'm gonna steal Mrs. Temple's idea and see if I can get those in the weekend update as well. But I know that they're working hard. I asked them to have them in by next week, but I'll see if I can get them in the weekend update as well.
Okay, a little competition going. I'm fine for that. Okay, that's helpful.
Her lead. She's a great role model.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, great. That's super helpful. And do we find out teachers? Is there a timeline for that?
I'm going to have to say September, and I can't give you a date. It's just going to be, with the survey.
No, you guys have your hands full, I'm sure.
The survey being extended to Friday, that gives us another week delay. So, I'm just going to have to say sometime in September.
Okay. And then last thing, when you had read off the high needs and you were talking about if they get more than 75% of their student days, we don't have that. Are all kindergartners though prioritized as 4 days? I had heard that rumor. Is that correct? Or is it only the pre-K and transitional?
So pre-K is prioritized for full time,
right?
According to the model, whether it's morning or a full day or afternoon. Transitional is. Kindergarten, we need to look at the specifics in regards to students. We really need to look at the service delivery and see if we can deliver all of those services within the half-day model because kids are coming for mornings. So hopefully we can deliver that. So that is, we still have to discuss that a little bit more.
So the kids, to answer your question, the kindergartners, they will be going 4 days, not 2, but it's going to be half days at this point.
Okay, that's great. I just wasn't sure if it was just 2 days. That's what I was trying to clarify. So it's definitely 4 days for the kindergartners. Okay.
They come Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in person from 8:50 to 12:15. So like the half day model, and then remote learning on Wednesday morning. So I do feel like we can meet the needs within those timeframes, but we have to look a little closer at the IEPs once the staff are in on September 1st.
So the question is if there's an extended day, basically, right? So if it runs like 12 to 2:40 or something.
Right. That's the question that we are looking at IEPs to see if that's something that we have the capacity or need to provide.
Okay. And do we need to reach out to you directly, or do you just figure it out and then you'll send us an email on that?
Nope, that's on our 10-day PD list for our service provider.
You guys are doing an incredible job. That's for sure. Okay. So we'll hold off then. So we'll plan on at least the mornings, and then the second graders though, there's no chance that they would do a full day, right? Even if they have an IEP and all that, it would, like, are you reviewing any of that, or it would just cut off?
So there is an opportunity. It depends on the extent of the service delivery grid. And, I met with our special ed staff last week, and we looked at each case individually. So they kind of have an idea, a ballpark of where they're going to go with the kids. Again, this is their summer vacation, so I can't make them come in and work. So once September 1st hits, we'll look at the IEP, we'll look at the B and C grids and see if we can deliver those within the 2 days. And if not, then we'll extend the days. And liaisons will be reaching out to parents within
they'll be reaching out to parents.
Yep. So you'll get communicated with directly through a conversation with your liaison, but then a follow-up to that will be the individual learning plan that spells everything out.
And then if we would fall into like regret, and I don't know if this is the whole compensatory services thing you were talking about, but like if we regressed in some other areas that weren't on the IEP plan, does that get considered after the fact? Do we kind of raise our hand then for that?
Yeah, so you would want to let us know that you've seen and you've experienced this regression. We would want the student to come back into school for us to be able to collect, some data as well, and then we would come together and consider your input, what you see in the areas of regression, and if we need to do further assessment or determine if there's additional services that need to be added, or compensatory services, or if we're able to recoup through that recovery support model. We'll look at all of those 3 categories and make the decision as a team.
And we can just wait. We should wait though until they come into school. He's hybrid anyway, so wait until they start school. We don't need to like let you know ahead of time or any of that. I'm trying to think about what do we have to inform you of so that you can make the best informed decisions when you're putting them in classes and all that.
Yeah, I would say let the students come in, let them adjust to the new routines and to see, because the recoupment is that some of the students that have setbacks, they're going to be able to, catch up in a short amount of time. And then there are students that are not going to, that we're going to see that that then meets the criteria for actual regression versus, a normal kind of summer slide setback. This has been a really long time. And so it's all going to be looked at on an individual case-by-case basis for sure, because some students have experienced regression, some have had a minor setback, and some have not had a setback as a result of this model. So there's no hard and fast rule, and so we're really going to be taking parents' input. And we're going to be wanting parents to communicate with us and for you to share with the liaison what areas you saw that, that setback, or what areas you saw your child struggling with, because then we're going to be able to look in those areas and see what we're seeing as well, and kind of put all of that together and then make a decision.
Got it. Okay. But I know you said you were kind of really trying to see how many kids you could get to be 4 days, at least to use your kind of maximize your resources in a safe way. Is that for all of the grades, or is that sort of start at the younger grades? Like would grade 2 only max out at 2 days, or are you trying to get them in for 4 days too?
We do want to get them in for 4 days. We wouldn't be making those changes at the first, during that first trimester though.
Oh, okay. Got it.
It would be extenuating circumstances, like I think Michelle mentioned, that if there was a student that was in a hybrid model and was on an IEP and was experiencing extraordinary struggles, and we provided some additional resources and supports in order to make the student more successful, and we still felt collectively that it wasn't working, we need to have the student in more, we need to have them in 4 days a week, then at that point we can look at those situations for sure.
Got it. But we'll do our best to make the plan work. That's what I got from Michelle. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that. I really appreciate all that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa Batista, your question, please. Melissa Batista?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Melissa.
Hi. Thank you guys for everything that you're doing. I just had one quick question. I have an incoming 3rd grader who is not on an IEP but does have a 504. So I'm curious how children with 504s will be supported in fully remote learning.
All right, do you want me to field that? So I will, and you guys jump in if you need to. So just in the same way that a student with an IEP will be provided their services, accommodations, and modifications, a student who is receiving accommodations or support through a 504 plan also would continue to receive those supports and accommodations. So while when the staff come back to school, the liaisons will be reaching out to the families of the parents on IEPs. The whoever's the 504 coordinator at the building level will be reaching out to you as well to look at what model you opted into. If you opted into full remote, how we are going to ensure that we are still providing that the accommodations under the student's 504 plan.
I just want to add that the person at Russell Street that reviews 504s and reaches out to families is our guidance counselor. Her name is Rachel Lighton. And in the days prior to school starting, Rachel will review all of the 504s and reach out. She reaches out and meets with the teachers, and they review the 504 plans, and then she reaches out to families. So you'll hear from Rachel before school starts on the 16th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Melissa. Christy, your question, please.
Hey, good afternoon or good evening. Thanks for all you do. As everyone has said, it is much appreciated. Happy to hear that we're moving towards synchronous learning versus what we did in the spring. I think what I would love is a little bit more detail on some of the questions around kids with executive functioning issues and who happen to have working parents who may have some accommodations for redirection in class. I think it was also linked to preferred seating. But I think from a redirection standpoint, from, just cutting down distractions and kind of helping to prioritize things, how actually would that really work from a remote standpoint that wouldn't necessarily include, say, a caregiver or a parent in the room?
Christy, I think I know it's you from Russell Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So one of the things we were talking about today in our task force meeting, honestly, is we will kind of be figuring this out as we go along as well, but we're anticipating those kinds of things. We talked a bit about really establishing norms with kids, just like adults have had to do in their office situations. We'll be establishing norms with kids to say, like at the beginning, like, when it's time for remote learners to take a 10-minute break. Now it's time to set your timer for 10 minutes. Everybody needs to come back at the end of the 10 minutes. And we anticipate that there will be kids who don't come back after the 10 minutes and will be emailing or calling home saying, that student didn't come back. And so there'll be a little bit of that happens until kids really get into a routine. But we really realize as educators that that's part of what we have to build into the learning, to what the expectations are and what the learning is for kids. But within our schedules, and I'm going to post some schedules in the weekend update this at the end of this week, so you'll be able to see that. There's time scheduled where kids get breaks, but there's independent time, there's whole group time, there's small group time. So it really is, it isn't a matter of a child just sitting in front of the screen for the whole time expected to pay attention. We really did try hard to break it up and incorporate some independent work time with some small group work time with peers, as well as small group work time with the teacher. So it kind of mimics a typical day when everyone's in the classroom. So I hope I know it's hard to explain it, but I think you'll be able to see it in the schedule a little bit better. And I do think, we've put a lot of work into the schedules, and I think they really will work as we implement them in a couple more weeks.
Okay, so what is Ms. Snow, you mentioned thank you, Cheryl, the timeline to if current accommodations and IEPs are just not translating appropriately from, whether it's hybrid, because certainly hybrid won't look the same as it did in February, as well as remote. What is the actual timeline to really look and see, okay, are these accommodations translating? Are they working? And, how do we, when do we say, okay, this is not working and this is going to happen? Is there like a baked in timeline for that?
There isn't a specific timeline for that. I do think that DESE has stated that so two things. So DESE has stated that by, I think it's December 15th, that we need to have held our meetings and have had our conversations with parents regarding if there is a need for compensatory services. But as far as if you just need to come together as a team to look at the accommodations and modifications or make some adaptations that go beyond what would just be still executing the services, but just looking a little bit different. That can be done through the individual learning plan. If there needs to be an amendment to the IEP, that can easily be done. The teams can easily be convened to have those conversations as well. And it's important to know parents are able to request a team meeting at any time that they want. Obviously it would be in reasonable timeframes, and we would want the staff to be able to get to know the students a little bit. But you can, if you feel that you need to pull the team together, you have every ability to do that and to request a team meeting, even if you want to have a team meeting just to discuss how things went over from March to June. That's absolutely something that parents are able to do.
Okay, so we actually did our AP meeting in the spring, so I'm pleased about that. But in terms of so I just really want to drill home this point in terms of like IEPs for executive functioning working parents, normally there'd be in-class support. Does that translate to, I think someone asked the question about like Google Classroom and Inbox, and is that, as you're thinking about these adaptations, is that kind of part of that service delivery now? Like, here, let me walk you through your assignments today and make sure that you are processing like what you need to do and when you need to do it.
Oh,
And
well,
you know what I mean?
Yep, most certainly. And so that could be done through an intervention block or a small groups coming together, because there are many students that struggle with the organization and planning and executive functioning. If it's something where the student needs to have like a prescribed like direct service to address that, that's also something that the team would be able to discuss as well. And if the student needs to have an individual Google Meet specifically for the purpose of organization, planning, and
Right.
that's also something that the teams can consider for sure.
Okay.
And too quickly, I just want to add, like at the Russell Street schedule, we still have like our WIN block built into our hybrid and remote schedules, the One I Need block. So individual kids throughout the week will be able to, determine what they need, or the teacher might determine what they need. And that indicates what group they would be in. So if someone was really struggling to get something done, that's what we're going to accomplish during the WIN blocks. And those are built in just like they would be when we're in school.
Oh, okay, cool. And that would be remote or hybrid, I assume, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, perfect. And I guess like the very last question I have, and thank you for your patience, is just kind of drilling down everything that I've heard tonight is, and it was my question that was first around, my son is sincerely concerned about his ability to sit in a room with a mask and not move around too much, and like kind of stay within. I understood your answer there, Mrs. Snow, around like just being really thoughtful and not letting them just wander wherever the spirit takes them and having more of a plan. But in terms of like, I don't want to say the tolerance, but I'm going to assume it's pretty slim for them to just not be non-compliant, because I feel like in order for this to all work, it works because everyone keeps their masks on and keeps their distance and sort of does their part. So I feel like that puts the teachers in an unfortunate kind of policing situation, and not just for kids with IEPs, because I've certainly seen enough shenanigans over the summer that it's a general kid thing. So I just didn't know if, and I haven't really heard a lot of talk about that, kind of how exactly is that really, I don't even know how to ask the question that makes any sense, quite frankly.
I absolutely know what you're asking, because it's a completely valid question. And I think, we're going to have to be responsive to it. So I think we can predict or anticipate what we might see, but we are going to have to see how things kind of play out. The cohorts are going to be very small, which is nice. And there's going to be, space for social distancing, which is great. And I think that there's potential advantages to a group contingency. So an environment of students where they're all kind of wearing the mask, there are students who are going to just fall into that because that's just kind of how they're wired. And then there are going to be students who are really going to struggle, and it's going to be a challenge for them, and they're going to feel like their face is sweaty and they're suffocating and it's too much and it's overwhelming, and then they can't focus on their learning because they're too focused on the uncomfortable mask. And we're going to be responsive to that, and we're going to handle that with understanding and with care. And we are going to have therapeutic supports available for students that need to kind of work through that and need to be able to access somebody that they need to talk to about this, because each child is going to handle it differently. There's kids that very quickly were able to put on a mask, and now they wear a mask all day long every day and not even know. It's the same kids that wear their bike helmets, come into the house after riding their bike and their helmet's still on. There are kids that's not going to be an issue for, and then there's going to be kids that it is going to be an issue for, and then there's going to be kids that we expect that it's going to be an issue and it's not. And so I think we really need to see kind of how it plays out, and just know that we're going to be very compassionate to students who are struggling, and that we're going to understand that it's a challenge and it's a new skill that some students need to learn, but it's also a school rule, and we expect that the students who are really able to are going to follow that rule, because it's a safety rule just like any other kind of safety rule that we have in the schools.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. It was more the divergence from theory to practice that I was a little concerned about.
Chrissy, I just wanna say too, last year, and you've probably saw it in your travels, we set up a little chill zone downstairs, Chillville, where kids could go, and we set it up to be a so kids could be proactive. And so if kids just thought like, I can't sit here anymore, I need to take a break, they were able to go down on their own, indicate to the teacher, and sit in that area. And so while we won't, and it was very successful for us last year, we noticed that kids were being very proactive, and being able to get out of the classroom, go spend a couple minutes down there, fidget with something, and then, go back up and be able to manage. And so we won't be able to use that space or our basket of fidgets, but we still want to set up an area outside of the building in the fresh air where kids can go outside and have a place to sit, and be able to still be proactive about, I better go outside. And we'll have people that will be able to escort kids outside, and we'll really encourage the being proactive versus reactive. If you are feeling like you're sweaty, your mask is itchy, you can't wear it anymore, instead of taking it off in the classroom, we would prefer to have kids ask to be able to go sit outside with their mask on and take the break that they need. So we're hoping to set up a proactive environment again, for those kinds of concerns.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. And did I hear somebody say that the survey had been extended till this Friday from yesterday?
It's extended for a couple of more days, so people could watch the forums who needed to watch the forums.
Oh, got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Lynn, it's after 7:15. There's 3 more questions. Should I consider these the last 3 questions?
Yep, that sounds good. Thank you.
A. Gilman, your question, please.
Hi there, it's Allie, and I just wanted, this is Allie Gilman. I am the special ed team chair for Shaker Lane and Russell Street. I wanted to add on to Lynn's answer for Susan Henry and just welcome you to Littleton Public Schools, and any new other families that are joining us will also be reaching out at the beginning of the year to talk about how the IEP that your child has is going to be best met within our public schools. So if there are other folks that are new to the district that are out there, we'll also be in touch with you soon. Okay? And that's all I wanted to say. It's nice to see you guys and hear some familiar voices, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Allie, because I also know you're on vacation this week, or you're like mountain climbing or something. So thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, I'm as much as it's nice to be able to enjoy some of the regular traditions that you have in summer. I can tell you that I'm really excited to get back to work, and I know that our teachers are too, whatever that may look like. So yes, take care.
Thank you.
Sandra Santoro, your question, please.
Hi. Thank you all so much as well for doing all this work. I have a question that I'm not sure, sorry if it's already been answered, but for pre-K, so in the past, I think there's normally kids from the community without IEPs that are included. Are those children also going to be at school in person this year?
Do you want to take that, Michelle?
Sandra, good to hear. Hope your little one's doing well. We miss her. So in the program that your child is in, our community peers will be attending half day. So for the 4-day, full day programs, the community peers will come 9 to 12. So that way we can focus on our students with disabilities in the afternoon. For the half day programs, the morning and the afternoon programs, our community peers that are in the program can maintain the same enrollment time.
Sandra, you're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Are you all set?
No, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. So those peers will be in the same class with the kids with IEPs or like in a separate classroom?
Same classroom.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. KJ, your question, please.
Hi, this is Kara Jeffries. Thank you for going over time for this last question. It's sort of a little bit of build on some of the last points that were made about the IEP and 504 scheduling meetings. If we missed our meeting in the spring because we went virtual, and we also have, I have someone who's also scheduled for the beginning of the year in October. How will that work? Will the October timeframe stay on track because it was already sort of planned out? And then will you try to fit the springtime misses in along with that? I'm just sort of curious on.
So we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing things concurrently. So we're going to be working through the backlog while still chairing the meetings from the beginning of the year going forward. So absolutely, we're going to be doing as much as we can at the same time. So we're going to be adhering to that that October annual, and also be making up the meetings that didn't occur back in the spring. And if they're siblings, then we could potentially move up that October meeting and do them both at the same time. If that would work out better for you, you can reach out.
Yes, they're siblings in 2 different schools. So,
well, if they're remote meetings, you might be able to coordinate.
Yeah,
so they're back to back for you.
that would be wonderful. And that was pretty much it for me. I just wanted to understand how that would work with because we had just missed it by like a few days in the spring. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That's all the questions, Lynn.
All right. Thank you all so much. We have another forum tomorrow night that is grades 6 through 12 plus, 6 through age 22. But if you're looking for something to do again tomorrow night, feel free to join us again at 6 p.m. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.